We're almost. So I thought today we ought to just get familiar with the subject, and some of us have been familiar with the subject in the past 2 years, and some are new to it. But so everyone's here except Michael Chen. We'll call the meeting to order, and I think everybody probably knows everybody, don't they? I mean, everybody knows Bill Walbert. Welcome, Bill.
Sure.
Yeah, I think everybody knows each other. And
I think so. I probably haven't met Paul Tully. This is Jim Bell. I think I know everybody else.
yeah, Paul's been serving on our Selectmen's Advisory Committee on Buildings and Infrastructure, along with Penny, and who else on here is on that?
I think Stuart's on that.
Stuart.
Stuart, yes. And actually, so Penny Ration and Jim and Bill Walbert, and who else has been on a building committee? Stuart, you've been on
Amy.
a building committee?
Amy is
You mean a town building committee?
Well,
Or any? I mean, Paul, you did you've done a ton of building.
yeah, and the town does own school buildings, Penny. So,
yes.
but I thought rather than electing officers today, this is more of a kickoff meeting in January when people we can focus more. This is, COVID is slowing everything down, obviously, and there's no desire to drag our feet on this. We're serious now, but standing up a building committee and figuring this out. Leanne will be glad to hear that. John, Andrew, it's time. And so Stuart, who's been involved with this for the past 2 years with me and others.
Kevin,
Yep.
can I interrupt for just a second? I don't know if you hit record.
Oh,
We are recording.
Good.
we are recording.
Excellent. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah. Actually, Tucker, are you hosting? I think.
Tiger's hosting.
Yeah, I'm a co-host, Kevin. Yep.
Yeah, co-hosting with, okay. So Stuart's been involved with this, Salvini, and Stuart, why don't you kind of give us where we are and your overview?
Yeah, I just keep with my prior reputation. Of course, I've got a little PowerPoint presentation here, so I thought it might be helpful just to give you a real quick 30,000 foot view of the conditions. Let me just bring up a PowerPoint presentation here and then figure out how to do share screen. Here.
Hey, has everyone here toured it? Everybody and everyone toured the PD?
I have.
Yeah, Amy, I was going to make the point that before the January meeting, those who have not toured the building, some of us are familiar with the building, and but anyone who hasn't toured the building recently should make an appointment with Andrew or John or Leon to do a tour before the January meeting, which will probably be around the third week of January. So.
All right, so let me just quickly fly through these. Some of you may have seen them before, and some of you don't have any history or background to the police building. And so, again, this is 30,000 feet, but should give you a little understanding of the history of the building and its current deficiencies. As some of you know, the building was originally constructed in 1926. It's now a 94-year-old building. The building has gone through a number of improvements. The most substantial renovation was back in 1981 when it was renovated from a school building into a police department. As you know, also, there have been a large number of renovations to various town buildings since that time. The police department back in 1981, and then we've had Waveney Pool, going up the list from the bottom to the top, the Volunteer Ambulance Corps, of course, in 2009, the fire department in 2015, 2015, and of course, most recently, Sachs Middle School in 2017. The building has, based on its age and improved building standards, is now failing in a lot of different ways. The furnace is an ongoing effort to improve, patch, repair. The air conditioning system, we've now had to supplement it with wall-mounted units, and it's clearly out of date and failing in so many different ways. The sewer system, we believe there's a leak below the foundation of the building, which in turn is causing accumulations of affluent, which in turn draws sewer flies. The windows and doors all are in dire need of being replaced, and it's really not worth doing to such an old building. Electrical system and the foundation itself, just to give you an example, after a major rainstorm, it's not uncommon that we find puddles in the basement. So the building is really in desperate need. In addition, of course, with new code throughout the state, as well as very specifically for a police department, the building should have sprinklers, should have, quote, hardened walls, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. There are a number of areas which are not ADA compliant. We've satisfied some areas of the building to meet ADA compliance, but other areas are still lacking. With a police department, evidence storage is a very sensitive issue, and we have our evidence spread in 6 different closets, which would no longer meet state standards. Our jail cells are deficient, our interview rooms are deficient. It's in dire need. To talk about essential buildings, there are a number of buildings defined by the state of Connecticut and perhaps nationally, and I'll let others who are more expert in this area than I address that. But a police department within the town of New Canaan would be deemed an essential building, i.e. when there are major weather conditions or other conditions that take place. This is a building that you need to have up and running no matter what. And the building does not meet all the essential building standards, building code standards as it needs to. As I've said, on the left is a picture of the New Canaan Police Department jail cells. The picture on the right is a more modern, contemporary jail cell as another example. And we could go down through the department in all of its various specialty areas. A sally port is where you bring a prisoner in and transfer the prisoner from an automobile to a jail cell, processing them through, fingerprinting and photographing and so on. And our sally port clearly does not meet current contemporary standards, nor do any of the others. The forensics lab, that we don't have a shooting range any longer. We used to in the basement of the building. That's gone. The women's locker room is at capacity. I don't think we could hire another woman police officer even if we wanted to, because we couldn't accommodate their locker room requirements. And I mentioned evidence storage and of course security with regards to the parking lot. Here's an example of the sally port. The sally port on the left is New Canaan's. The sally port on the right is a more contemporary state-of-the-art sally port, just to give you an example of that. And of course, we're in a competitive environment as well. New Canaan Police Department is the largest department besides the Board of Education, the largest department within the town of New Canaan, with 53 employees. And unlike many of the other departments, the police department, of course, is open 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And so the building is used a lot. And we're, as a building, we're then in a competitive environment and competing against attracting officers to the New Canaan Police Department, which could otherwise or may otherwise be hired by others. So if you look at other departments in the neighborhood, Stanford Police Department, of course, is brand new, state-of-the-art, gorgeous. Norwalk Police Department, brand new, state-of-the-art, again, gorgeous. Darien Police Department, newly renovated with some new buildings. The Newton Police Department, again, brand new, state-of-the-art. And so we're competing for great officers, and we're competing against other departments that have got some beautiful buildings and beautiful work environments. So just as again, top level, we've, back in 2010, I think was the first time we raised the idea of renovating or rebuilding the police department. And we're still about 10 years now. Well, it's been about 10 years now. We've still not yet addressed it, but hopefully this year we will, or this upcoming year we will. All right. Just again, 30,000 feet. These numbers are, and the scenarios here are historically looking backwards. In the past, we've considered 4 different scenarios: renovate the existing building, build a brand new building on a brand new site, build a brand new building on the existing site, i.e. tear down the current building and build on the existing site, but a brand new building. And then another idea, of course, would be to buy an existing building and then renovate it into a police department. And out of those 4 scenarios, you can run all kinds of math. These numbers are all out of date at this point, so please don't focus on the numbers or the details here. It's really more the concept of, we have 4 scenarios to look at, and what do we want to do? And I can describe advantages and disadvantages to each one, but at least you get a sense for the range of possibilities that we can consider.
Yeah, Stuart, the Newtown building actually is not a new building. They bought a printing plant and converted it, or are converting it. It's in the process of being built. Bethel, on the other hand, built a brand new building, and we toured that. And
So, Stuart, I don't know if you want questions now. I was just on option number 3. Where would the new building on the existing site go? Behind the current building?
Yep, you could either do it.
Sorry.
You could either do it behind the current building, or you could tear down the existing building and build it there, or you could build new behind the existing building. I had suggested, just as a brainstorm, and I do not understand all the details needed to walk and talk this one forward, but again, just as a brainstorm, there is a living facility behind the existing building. Could we find another alternative and move those residents to a different location, and then be able to have that area as well as the existing building area to build new? There are lots of different ways one could roll that forward. I'm not suggesting there's any good way necessarily, but those are possibilities.
Thanks.
Did I answer it, Penny?
Yeah, that's good.
All right, so now does that stop sharing automatically, or do I need to turn that off?
You're still sharing.
You have to turn it off, Stuart.
Can you email that to us at the end? That'd be helpful to have just for the history.
Yes, yeah, Penny. Hang on a second, you guys. Oh, here we go. Stop sharing.
And you could add that we've done the elementary schools too. Those were done in the 90s.
Yep.
Stuart, not to pick nits, but DPW's second, PD's third.
Okay.
I got 57 employees. I
Okay,
beat
thank
Lena by a little bit. Sorry.
Everybody counts.
Everybody counts, right?
so my thought was that this committee is going to have to spend the first several months investigating, do we buy, build or renovate? So in January, when we convene a first full meeting and lay out a schedule, Stuart has actually spent a lot of time investigating almost every property in town. But over time, things change, and also, whether there's a building available in town that could be repurposed. So I think those are the things we have to investigate. There's a lot of problems with trying to operate a police department while you're renovating the building,
Yeah.
which also adds probably $1 million plus in cost to the project, because you have to move out a large part of the operation to another facility. Irwin House is always there, perhaps to use as a swing space, but
Right.
Stuart,
It's
do you have any further
particularly
thoughts?
complicated with the police department, with all the systems you have to have up and running.
I'm sorry, Amy.
Particularly complicated with the police department, of all the systems that have to be, set up and ready to go in a temporary space, just.
Yeah. We did renovate the fire department in place, and it wasn't a great experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
I understand it. Any thoughts about, we want to discuss for a few minutes? Stuart, do you have any further thoughts about buying or building versus renovating?
Well, obviously,
Locations?
if we could find a site, my personal choice would be to build new. The efficiency of the building is far greater when you have spaces that are specific or purpose specific. So building a new building means you're designing it with only the items you really want in it. As compared to renovating a building where there's bound to be spaces that are allocated to a prior use, which the police department may not be able to utilize. And hence, and a simple example of that just would be the current building has got stairwells, which are massive. I mean, wide, large stairwells, but of course it was designed for a school. So, the police department doesn't really need stairwells that are as massive as they are. And so anytime you take a building and renovate it, you're not going to get the efficiency out of the building as you'd like. So my first choice would be to go for a new building. That being said, the challenge is where. So.
And then divesting or repurposing, the current building in location, which, yeah, I would agree. I mean, repurposing a building for its non-intended use, it's clunky. It doesn't work. And I would agree, Stuart. I mean, there are so many staircases in that police department. There's the whole middle of the back is just like lost. I mean, it's just, and I know when we've looked at this before, that the challenges are deep in terms of, even if you just want to keep the facade and add to the back, it's very expensive. So, I think we need to take a very holistic approach to it. And I think very importantly, as we work through this, and you to go from understanding what is needed in a police department, what you have, because people will say, well, why don't you have this? Or why don't you have that? I think people have to understand what is required of a police department, which, Stuart, you were saying, essential buildings. There's requirements and code you have to have. And we need to make sure everybody in the community understands it, because that's going to drive in terms of what potential options and where you could do it. So, we really define what is needed and then look at the options. As we do through this, I think it's really incumbent upon us as we work through this and look at all the variables and come to understanding, make sure we communicate that well to the community, because people say, why didn't you think about this? Why didn't you think about that? So I think as we go through this, building on kind of what Stuart had, and make sure we communicated that to people as we come up to a recommendation, I think it's really, really going to be critical to moving this forward. And, the building needs help, and we keep throwing money in to keep it muddling along, and that's not a good use of money.
One of the things we should do early on, because everybody's got opinions, is we ought to write down fairly simply, it doesn't have to be 100 pages, but 2 to 10 pages of things that have to, the requirements. So we have a requirements document that we can be evaluating things against. if you just say, well, I like this, I like that, it's kind of hard to make comparisons.
Yeah.
But I think we ought to start, I mean, we could probably build that off some of the stuff that Stuart just said, but we ought to make a requirements document that's building neutral.
Right, and I think a lot of that would be easier. I know the people that have been working on the police building for a long time have toured some of the other towns' facilities, but for the newer members of the committee, I mean, I would love to see a new state-of-the-art police station like Stanford's, and I would love to see a renovated one, maybe Darien-Ann's, and certainly sometime in January, I would love to be able to book a tour and I don't know if we do it as the committee or how we do it, but I think that'll be very helpful as we put together our list of must-haves.
Right, I think that's a good idea.
The two architects before.
Right.
Could you put together a requirements document, or do we sort of already have that based upon what we were given?
Well, yeah, Jim, to respond specifically to a requirements document, we've had two architects give us their lists and they were working in conjunction with Leon and his team to not only address the specific spaces, but also the amount of area that each space would need. I'm sure, I mean, if I go into my archives, I'm sure I've got copies from both architects
Well, we got to take one of them and just update it. If people distribute it up, people could look at it, and we got to update it, and make sure it's current, and it should be building neutral. It shouldn't be based on, oh, we have to replace this building. But I think the way you described it would be great.
Actually, Leon and John and Andrew, would you like to address this topic? And Andrew, I'd like you to mention the regionalization study that's been underway at Westcoggan.
Sure. For the past, I don't know, maybe year, we meeting together with the Western Council of Governments on a subcommittee through which we were evaluating different aspects of regionalization throughout the county. 5 towns were part of the original study. That would be Reading, Ridgefield, Wilton, us, and I believe it was Bethel. And now there's expanded interest in cutting it down to just looking at sharing dispatch or CAD systems, and also another committee in looking into a training facility and or firing range for regional purposes. And that's where we're at right now. There's no study out about the CAD RMS or the shared facility for training. We're still in process with that. What has been decided that's not worth doing is having a shared gym just for practical purposes of having people commuting for a gym purpose. Just doesn't make sense with people work anyway. And also having a shared jail just isn't going to be cost effective at this point. It would be very expensive to have a shared county jail. So that's where we are now. We're still in process of evaluating any shared CAD RMS systems, and also in process of looking into having a shared training facility and or firing range. And that's just where we are now.
What's the time frame on that?
I believe both studies should be done within 2 months, I believe. Right. Kevin, could answer that better. Maybe you guys gave the requirement for an ending date.
Yeah, it kind of morphed into a different, the idea of really combining departments, it doesn't work, and you have to be close to your community. And but on the other hand, when Bethel built their new building, I forget what it ended up costing, like $16 million. They built the shell of a firing range, but didn't have the money to fit it out. So, whether it would make sense to work together with Wilton and Weston and Reading to share a Bethel facility or something, since a lot of our officers live up to the north and east of us, or whether, Wilton, we've been talking to Wilton for almost 2 years about sharing a facility between Wilton and New Canaan, where they have more land in Wilton, perhaps that, but anyway, I think we're of the view, and Leon, you might want to address this, that doing a firing range, Darien built one, and obviously Stanford has a state-of-the-art one, but a firing range is $1 million plus item.
Yeah, that's a challenge. I explained to a few folks that have toured the building recently and in the past that as a result of the renovation of the 3rd floor and the installation of an elevator,
that has thwarted the ability to put a longer range in. So our previous range, which has been out of service for, I think, more than a decade, was not long enough for qualification purposes, for state qualification. So, and it had to be remediated due to lead and just dysfunction. So the elevator has, the installation of that has prevented it from being long enough. I think one architect said, or somebody supposed, that 2 lanes could be built that were long enough, whereas a 3-lane range, but 2 were long enough for qualification. But it is $1 million plus. You know, maybe we could relook at it, but I don't know if it's feasible given the dynamics of our building.
Is there no ability to, I mean, you have 2 brand new police departments, and Darien's is what, 10 years old? Is there no ability to, be able to let our guys arrangement, our officers have access to those facilities under some sort of, lease payment or something? I mean, like Stanford's brand new, right? I mean, is it used 100% of the time, or is it just the logistics are tricky?
Yeah, I mean, Stanford's a possibility, but they also have 300 officers, so I think they have tons of training going on all the time. Darien, I spoke with their chief, and he wasn't crazy about us continually using it. We use it on occasion as needed, but some kind of continuous use, because believe it or not, the way they designed that range, when you get a lot of use there, it doesn't bring out the fumes well. There's some kind of dysfunction with the range. And also there's offices that back up to the range. So when there's shooting going on, people can't really work. So, at doubling the capacity, I think would be a challenge for him. We go when we can't use other facilities, and he's kind about that. But I don't think he would agree to a long-term shared use. And the reality, there's no public ranges near us that are indoor that are the ability for us to use consistently. We do use one in Ridgefield, outdoor and indoor, but there's really nothing local so far. I could speak to Stanford's chief and see if he's interested, but I think they're always a little wary about bringing in, another agency just because it's not done, maybe. But we could explore it, but I don't know how receptive they would be.
So where do your officers do the required training right now? Just a patchwork?
Well, they do it. They go up to there's an outdoor range up in Danbury, Ridgefield line. That's a state range per se that they use for outdoor. And then indoor, they use a facility in Ridgefield, and that actually is a model for a shared public-private use facility, and that would be ideal from a lot of different perspectives. Specifically, what it is, it's a range that's built adjacent to their highway department, and a certain number of days a week, the police department uses it, and the rest of the week, a private club uses and maintains it. So pretty much it covers all the usage, and I'm actually a member of it. It covers all the actual usage of it. And so it's kind of an ideal model, public-private. So that's something, if we had a space in town to do a range, I think we could generate a lot of support for it. Whether, I don't think it'd be in our building, but if there were somewhere else we could put a range, I think there's a lot of enthusiasts in town that would contribute to it, and we could build a public-private partnership that would be well used and frankly be the most economical. But
so the benefits, Leon, the benefits would be that perhaps 50% of the capital cost would be contributed by the private partnership, by the private share, and 50% of the operating costs would be covered. And when you look at the actual utilization of the range by the police department, you certainly do not use the range 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. You give us some scale of the number of hours that officers are required to go through training on an annualized basis.
Yeah, typically it's a 2-day recertification in September, and then a multi-day certification in the spring. So that's the actual structured training. And then in between, there's not regimented training, but training going on, not for the purposes of qualification, but for familiarization and use. So
And would you say that the vast majority of that training can be done during the day?
I would say that's accurate, yes. The
So
vast majority is done during the day, yeah.
the private public partnership would work out from a building utilization perspective, ideally, in that the private portion of it could be using it during the late afternoon and evenings, where the police department could be using it during the day. So there's some nice benefits to that kind of a structure if we could ever find a location once again.
Yeah, that's the challenge. And Ridgefields works is a perfect model because it works extremely well. In fact, we use that range on occasion. We rent it, and the model there works. So it just seems to make the most sense.
But from what you're saying, in terms of the amount of training that is required, I know people will do extra. That seems like a very big investment for us for training that is getting done at other locations without us taking on $1 million expense for a range on top of, I know there's a lot of maintenance on it as well. So it seems like, you know, and I get back to what Jim was saying, you know, the needs, the needs, like we absolutely positively need this in a police department. The nice to haves as well, right? So
Well, but on the other
as we're
hand,
looking at this going forward.
That's why a partnership with Wilton, who's actively looking at building a new building on their town hall campus. It would make sense to do something with them because they're close and we'd essentially cut the cost in half, the capital investment and operation as well. So
Kevin, there'd be no reason why.
Another thing to consider though too is with training an hour away, we have to pay our people. So to pay our people to travel an hour away, that is significant expense. It has to be factored in. And if we can do that in town property, we can train a lot of people while they're working. We can pull 2 or 3 people in while they're on shift and not incur those overtime expenses, because once they travel, it's 4 hours of overtime for every person. So just to keep in mind
with the
for that.
Wilton idea, you know, you're keeping the purpose of this training facility within the safety, municipal safety umbrella versus, you know, wrapping it into recreational, and people may have different views upon, you know, if this is something they want the town to get involved with, you know, so you're keeping it within that health and safety, the safety component of it on a municipal level, and not pulling it into, you know, a greater town discussion.
Yeah. And not to get too far into the weeds of a range, but there are range facilities that you can buy that are modular. Basically, all you need is a concrete pad and they can come in and drop it down. So if we did have an area, say at the Public Works facility or somewhere where they could put a concrete pad, there's these modular units that you can come in. They're already ventilated, they're already purpose built, and they're basically look like those big containers. It's what they're built in. And each one, I think, is 2 lanes. So if you bought 2 of them, you would have 4 lanes and so on. So that is an option, but we can discuss that for in the future meetings.
So we launched into this topic on requirements, and I think, Leon, do you have any further thoughts about requirements between Leon and Stuart?
Yeah, I mean, we could very clearly put a simple list together of what's required. And I also have a guide that's a few years old that the International Police Chiefs Association put together that I could distribute to everybody. It's pretty long, but it's a guide on police facility building and renovation and all that. So it's kind of useful. We could certainly put a list together of essential items. That wouldn't be that hard. Andrew could start working on that.
Is there any guidance on in terms of location? And I mean, you know, that it should be in the center of town, or should it be, you know, close to a highway? Because I know that's come up in the past, and I didn't know if there was any preferences there.
Well, that should be in the requirements document, and that you know, what's best and what's second best.
Right.
Right. And Tucker, obviously, receptivity, you know, if you're into the middle of a residential neighborhood, that's going to be tough versus not. There is one slight difference from a police department compared to fire or ambulance, and that is that when there's a 911 call, a fire truck will leave the firehouse an ambulance will leave the EMS building, but the police department typically would have 2 or 3 officers out on the road, and their response will be from the road, not from the building. So, the siren activity is probably I don't know, 20% of what it might be for a firehouse or a EMT building, just as a.
Thank you. That's a good point.
So in terms of the requirements, either of the architects that have looked at this before, have they put together, a document showing requirements for New Canaan? Because it's good to see what model is for other people, but it'd be nice to see the best analysis that we've had from an architect for New Canaan on needs.
Yes, I believe both did, Leon. Did they not? Both architects came up with a requirements document?
Yes.
Pretty sure they did. Yeah.
Mhm.
So we
I
can
also
start-
believe, that document that Leon mentioned from the International Police Chiefs Association is a great primer. I went and found it on the internet and had been reading it for a little while here. It's pretty comprehensive from a complete perspective of, I think, encompassing all of these thoughts and requirements that we're looking for. I think it's a long read, but I think it's worthwhile for you to share, Leon. I think everybody, I might have it too as well as in a PDF, but I think it's super helpful.
Sure.
Or it has been for me at least.
Yeah.
So one of the 2 architects I've worked with before, Brian Humes, and he's got a pretty good knowledge of the New Canaan police situation since he was the architect on the 3rd floor renovation in 2006. So I'd like to see his as certainly a good suggestion, Paul, but we can put those 2 together.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, we previously had worked with both. There's 2 leading police department architects in the Northeast, and they've built probably 90% or more of all the police departments in Connecticut, Massachusetts, in the Northeast. So that is this committee is going to have to address the architect question early on, but the requirements and what they've already given us, we're going to obviously build a complete package. The only thing dispensable is probably the range as far as being on site. And otherwise you have to do a complete, you meet all the requirements. So it's I suggest we move on to the next item on the agenda, which was determine deliverables and project schedule. I suppose that might be better to discuss in January. Obviously, again, my thought is that we spend several months, the committee spends several months evaluating locations and build versus renovate. And in the course of that, also look at requirements and but I think the next subject is, budget. Kind of falls into that too. You can build most fully outfitted facilities look like they're costing $17, $18, $20 million. Who wants to address budget? Stuart,
Well, obviously I've done a gazillion spreadsheets over the course of the last couple of years, looking at various scenarios. Again, keeping our 4 buckets: renovate the existing, build new at the existing location, build new at a new location, and then build or renovate an existing building, but renovate it again to meet the needs of a police department. So there are substantial differences. As you build a brand new building on a brand new site, as an example, that means you can maintain use of the existing site. And that saves you almost $1 million, at least according to the architects. It saves you almost $1 million of temporary space expense. So there are considerations of that kind to be included. The other significant consideration would be, as somebody addressed earlier, the existing police building. If we were to build a new building at a new site or a new building at a renovated site, the existing police building would have some value, and would we view that as an offset to the expense of the new police building? So if we were to take the existing building and sell it to a real estate developer, for example, are we able to consider that an offset? And then, and then of course, the last component of financial analysis might be the cost on a per square foot basis and the number of square feet that we require. And to Jim's earlier comment, you know, we need a requirements document that we all agree to with regards to the amount of square foot that we need. So once we've arrived at that document and we're all on the same page, then we can go out and look at a cost per square foot. And then we can look at the various scenarios with regards to build new or renovate. Anyway, I don't, my numbers are old and we should, I think, start with the requirements document as a first step.
Kevin, at some point, assuming the project goes forward, we're going to need a certain amount of seed money. Maybe it's 100,000, maybe it's 500,000 to get to engage some professional help. Whether, and probably, as you pointed out, that probably that could be the selection of the architect, or it could be just to select somebody for the feasibility phase, and you could change. But anyway, whatever it is, there's going to need to be some money appropriated if you want to make this a project short of the full amount.
Well, that's a good point, Tiger. We're putting together a budget. How much do we need to budget for the 2021 calendar year to for this committee?
Well, we have right now in the buildings budget, we have $7.5 million as an earmark for 22 and 23, split over 2 years. We already have monies for engineering costs. I'm checking right now, but I believe it's in the $500,000 range, but I'll check.
Oh,
I think that's the number, right?
Was that appropriate?
We definitely appropriated, not this year, the prior year. That was a line item. I just can't remember what year.
I would think the number needs to be in the 500 to 750 range for 20.
And the idea that money would be part of a bonded project overall. So, but maybe we have to refresh that appropriation in order to have it eligible for bonding. I don't know.
It's like part of the soft costs, which would be part of that would be bondable.
They can be bonded.
It's definitely bondable.
Right.
If we need to, yeah.
So that's a question, Tiger, for Linda and Joe. If you would talk to Linda as to whether or not we need to reappropriate money, because I think there's a timing period in terms of when you have to have the money. Well, I guess it's probably when it's spent in relation to the bonding.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would think if this committee does its job well, we'll be spending some amount of money prior to the start of the next fiscal year, and then more of it, most of it, in the next fiscal year of the seed money.
Other considerations about budget? Yeah, I would mention too, in looking at both Wilton and Bethel, every time people in Newtown, they try to set a figure and then they engineer things out of it. And Wilton's struggling in particular to come up with a feasible project that they think they can afford. The reality is you have to bite the bullet and realize you're building another building for 100 years, and you have to plan to do the whole package and do it right. So, and
That's right.
You know, the architects have warned us, it will be very expensive to renovate that existing building, which you pretty much have to gut it in order to make it state of the art for a police department.
Kevin, that's the one thing I'd like to add is our infrastructure, you know, the electrics, the plumbing, the heating, cooling, those are all have to be considered in our needs, you know, right up, because that's something that's significantly lacking in our department. Having been deeply involved in the renovation of the dispatch area, that was one of the significant challenges, was getting power to the dispatch center, because it's so disjointed. It's been so patched together for so many years. There's literally residential circuit panels in 4 or 5 different closets throughout the building, which is kind of ridiculous for a commercial building to have that kind of patchwork electrical, and the plumbing and heating always is in some sort of failed state. So to try to renovate that in place, I have to believe would be a significant challenge and a significant cost.
That's why I tend to agree with Stuart. I mean, ideally we do it in a new building, because it just it's going to be almost as costly to renovate that building. And the developers we've had look at that building have said, you know, it's a very desirable place for housing, and let someone else gut the building and turn it into a useful housing project, but,
And added to the tax rolls.
and add it to the
Right.
tax
Right.
rolls.
Good point, Amy.
So ideally, we have to find another piece of property, or whether it's feasible to build a new building behind that building and then repurpose that would coexist with perhaps senior housing or something that could work there. I mean, but I think that's what this committee has to figure out over the next several months.
Kevin,
That's
I think basically all the numbers, and again, we start with the requirements document, we build our way up from there, but I think the expectation might be the cost of a brand new building in your mind might be in the 15 million range.
No, I think realistically, I mean, Darien spent $17 million 7 years ago or 8 years ago,
Right.
to actually renovate an existing building and extend. They have 37,000 square feet. It's like Fort Knox.
It's nuts. Yeah.
No, we don't need that.
We don't need that. No.
Let's
They got a
go.
lot more bad people in Darien. Of course, they need a bigger police department.
Actually, it's true. They have I-95, which presents a different demographic in terms of their policing. So,
But of course, Kevin,
I'm thinking we're talking $20 million realistically.
you know what? I think the people need to realize every building has a useful life and every construction project has its useful life. And, it's time for us to make sure that one of our essential departments has the appropriate building that they need, and that we put together a building that works for the police department and for the town for the next generation or two.
Right.
And
I mean, realistically, you're talking about a building that'll last 100 years.
well, at least 30 without a renovation. So, come on. I don't know any window that lasts 100 years. So,
Well, we hope to get another 100 years out of this town hall. The reality is, these are essential buildings, and you're always going to need a police department. You're always going to need a town hall.
yeah, I have to emphasize, we really need to be able to educate the population about what, the needs is really important. Because I have heard many people say to me, why do we have, such a big building when there's 10 people in it at any one point in time? So I think we need to explain, really, the unique features of this type of municipal structure. So that people understand why it has to be what it is.
When we toured the Bethel building, it's a nice building,
Mhm.
but I can't see us building that building in New Canaan.
Now I know. Yep.
We're gonna have to build a first-class building, and you can't do it on the cheap.
No, agree with you. Well said, both of you.
So let's talk a little more about the architects. Leon and Stuart, you've been working with the architects over time, and why don't we just review what we did with both of them when we were looking at the Covia building as a possible conversion, or do you want to wait till January to talk about architects?
Yeah, so you want to do that this morning?
We got 10 more minutes. I thought we'd keep this to an hour.
Yeah. Well, go ahead, Leon, help yourself.
Yeah, so Brian Humes, whom we've dealt with for probably more than a decade. He did the ambulance corps. He did our third floor of this building. He's done Stanford Police Department, Darien, and I think Danbury, host of other departments. Very well regarded and very buttoned up in a lot of ways. And then the other architect was, refresh my memory, Stuart, who that was?
Yeah, I don't remember myself.
Wasn't it Castle Booze?
Castle Booze. Castle
Is,
Booze.
yeah, Chuck,
So he was a newcomer for us. He just did Newtown Police Department, and they're very happy with that. So I think they're both relatively balanced. So they both looked at Covia building, renovating it, adding to it, and pretty comprehensive proposals on both ends. That didn't work out. And Brian had done pretty comprehensive plans, which we still have copies of, for proposing of renovating and reallocating the spaces in our existing building. It's kind of an old plan, but we do have that. So that's kind of a snapshot of what they've done. I think it's all needs to be refreshed.
I think, as I recall, Brian Hughes actually worked for Chuck Booz. Brian
Yeah.
Humes?
Yeah, I think early on in his career.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's spilled off.
But Castle Booz did the Cambridge Mass Department. I think they did Nantucket, or did.
You could be right. I'm not sure.
We have qualifications brochures on both of them. They both, do we actually issue an RFP, Stuart, or they both issue, they both gave us documents which we'll share.
Mhm. Yeah.
As
Yeah,
far as their projects
we've been
they've
working
done.
we've been
So
working with
we've already
Brian
done all
for-
that work. The issue will be selecting one of the two, I think, in a process, but also it's going to make a big difference whether we're renovating versus building new.
Yep.
Well,
Well, unless we know what the costs are for a renovation, how can we make a decision? Renovate versus new?
Well, I think it's pretty
mean,
clear.
Unless we have,
Renovation is,
rough cost.
I mean, they both of them made clear. It's, don't fool yourself as to what it's going to cost to renovate that building. We're talking 12,
yeah,
$14 million. It ain't going to be cheap.
Yeah, and
Because you have-
Kevin, that was
No.
2 years ago. Those numbers were 2 years ago, and construction
Exactly.
costs keep going. We only know that construction costs go up, they never go down.
I mean,
all right, well, why don't we have them go back and and just redo their numbers on a sort of a 30,000 foot level, just so we have sort of a framework to use as going forward. And I think we're all open
It would strike me that we as a group would want to get comfortable with the professional that we want to use in the first phase of this project. So if it's one of those two, we should do it, but we should, as a group, sort of go through whatever process we need to go through to get comfortable with who we're selecting to help us. And that could be, if we had this $500,000, we could figure out how much, what we think that effort is going to cost.
Yeah, I think that's
I
for the
don't think we
committee.
want to ask for anything right now until we sort of have our path forward, and because whatever professional we bring on board, we're going to need a really detailed, up to speed document to help us with the town bodies to justify the needs and the cost.
So basically, let's get our ducks in a row before we start pulling people on board to do
Yes.
estimates.
So that's for this committee to start working on in January.
Okay.
What's your timeline? What are you trying to do in terms of evaluating build new versus renovate? As far as
We do have, Kevin, we do have $498,000 available for engineering services.
Good.
that we could
So is
probably
that, can we
use some of
use that for architecture? Can we-
It's
is
for
that-
engineering and architecture is what
Okay,
it's.
okay,
what
so we
it is.
have it, okay.
Yes, yeah. We had 500,000, we spent 2K.
Where'd
We
the
got
2K go?
498,000.
where do we spend
think
2K?
I think it was $1,000 to both of the two of them. I'm not
Oh,
quite
for
certain.
that, yeah, for that one, yeah. Mhm.
But you said, so we have
We have 498.
80,000 left?
Yeah, $498,000 left, yes.
And Tiger, that's in this fiscal year?
It's in fiscal 19, but it's a bonded project, so it continues to roll.
that. We can definitely use some of that money in the first half of next year for sure.
So talking
So
about,
at the end of fiscal 21, sorry, Kevin, we'll have to ask for it to roll again, but that's the Board of Finance. It's a
Right.
request to the Board of Finance.
so why don't we plan on adopting a meeting schedule in January? But as far as Tucker, could you undertake to ask people what their availability is? And, probably next meeting should be third week of January, and then probably going forward, the third week of the month. Are people okay with meeting at morning?
I was going to say, is there a time of day that works for you?
During the day rather than at night?
Yes.
Yeah,
Morning, noon, afternoon? What's your preference?
Amy, are you
Morning.
okay with?
Morning.
Morning?
Yeah, morning meetings are better.
Yeah, I would say for me, I'm better at the back end of the week.
Okay, so
Like-
mornings, like a Thursday morning?
Yeah, because the market's busier in the front part of the week. So typically I have a little more flexibility later in
So
the
I'll
week.
send you all out a possibility of a date and time, and then you can all just reply back to me.
well, can we just maybe talk a little bit about the time? Right now, we could all
Yeah.
reply back. But what's, I mean,
Well,
What-
this
what-
worked today for Thursday at 10:30.
It's worked.
Yeah,
Huh?
maybe-
I would say I mean, people who work can tell me more, you know, do you want to go a little earlier, just so if you're gonna have it,
Yeah.
you get it done and then get it out. 10:30 sort of the middle of the day. I would think that we'd be better off with something a little bit.
How about
or-
9 or 10? 9,
30?
Tucker, are there any other committees that meet on
9:30.
Thursdays?
Not that I'm aware of. I'm just looking at the overall calendar now. So we could do Thursday morning, the 14th at 9:30.
Can we do 9 AM, Tucker? It's just, day gets really busy after 10.
It's up to you guys. Thursday, January 14th, 9 AM.
Good.
Good,
Yeah.
good-
That's
good
fine.
Good for me.
All
I
right,
would
I'll send out
So
a reminder.
just so you know, in my experience, we can always adjust the building committee times, but my experience with these building committees is that, you know, an hour is great for this. We're probably gonna, everybody have to have at least an hour and a half in this initial phase. It's gonna be a lot to go through. So what, you know, set a time that you think could work for that.
Yeah.
You know, and hopefully we'll keep it to an hour.
Yeah, I would say, and generally I'm like 8 AM, let's do it. But for me, if honestly, this time worked a little bit better just because whatever's coming into the market's in and then I can walk away, but I'm sure I can work around it. So I'll just be flexible.
But so, okay, and all of that's good points. So I've got us down for the 14th at 9 AM and we can set up a link and send it out to all of you.
Sounds good. We need to just to make this simpler, to have regular meetings, we need to file that plan in January
Right.
with the town clerk.
And
Right.
are you suggesting, Tucker, that we do this every month, or is that just for January?
That was just the January 14th. I've also, I can tell you that it works better if you have a set date and time, you know, that everybody knows that that's a time that is that
So
particular.
that would be the second Thursday, as an example, second Thursday of every month at 9 o'clock, as an example.
Yeah, which would take us then to February 11 and we could just carry on for the second Thursday.
You know, just to be clear, if we're going to get this done, maybe it'd have to be done by subcommittees, but we can't get this done meeting once a month. It's going to have to be
No,
much
agreed.
more frequent meetings.
But the larger group can meet on these days and then, yes, smaller groups will have to have meetings in
Right.
between.
Right.
So why don't we do this for the filing purposes? Why don't we file January 14, February 11, and March 11, just for our preliminary group meetings, and then we can get to subcommittees as we move along.
Yeah, go ahead and file the whole
Okay.
year and then we can easily back
Okay.
out. It's easy to back
Yeah,
off.
easy to cancel. Okay, so I'll do the whole year, second Thursday of a month, and we'll go from there.
That way it avoids special meetings.
Exactly. Okay.
Sounds good. And then in the interim, whoever, I think Leon and Stuart, whoever, you know, is able to pull together the documents that we have, the police study of needs, you know, just to the group, kind of just so people can review it at their leisure. That'd be great.
Well, they're spending their Christmas holiday locked down.
As a choice, would you prefer to see the original documents that came from each of the architects, or would you like to
Yeah,
see one
yes.
consolidated?
No,
file?
I'd like to see the original.
Okay, so then why don't I go ahead and pull those together and circulate them? And then Leon, if you would pull together the International Police Chiefs requirement document and circulate that.
Sure.
Okay.
Do we have a distribution list for the group?
It's on that email, Leon, that I just used to remind people.
Okay.
Actually, I think I made a mistake though, Penny, in terms of your email address. There's no dot between Penny and Ration, right? So it's
No dot, right.
and I didn't use the Board of Ed address, but would you prefer to use that?
No, so this is not Board of Ed, so that's just Penny Ration. Do you have Penny Ration at optonline.net?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
We need to correct. So again, any
Penny, I would just caution against that, but that's just me. I like to
Caution
keep all my
against
accounts. Yeah,
Using your
just,
personal.
you know,
Yeah, Tucker, would you circulate?
I wouldn't use a personal email for a building committee.
Well, actually, for that matter, do you want to
Why
create?
don't you get me, I mean, you can use my Board of Ed account, that's fine.
Right.
Yeah,
So, but Paul, do
it's,
you?
it's an FOI-ish, issue. And
Right,
you
right.
have-
it
No,
is.
that's what's
Yeah,
gonna
yeah,
happen.
You're right, you're right.
That's a
I
fair
think you're
point.
right.
Why don't we create,
Why don't you just, I can add another email to my list. You can
Well-
create a town one.
And that
Yeah,
way,
why don't we
if
create
this
town
is a
ones for-
concern, we
for
ought to do it.
Paul and Jim. And Amy's already got one.
Yeah.
Bill needs one again. He's probably still in the system. We can just reactivate it. We pay $100 a year for each email address, but we only need three.
Yeah, just get me a new Canaan one. That'd be good.
Yeah,
Good.
yeah, I agree. Let's get unique ones.
Joe, do you have anything, or Tiger?
Oh, I'm good. Joe?
No, I think you covered it all.
Michael, you haven't said
There's a
anything.
lot to do.
Sorry?
You haven't said anything.
Well, I've been listening. I like to listen and, but you know me, I think I've been working with you and Leon for a couple of years now. We need this building and we need to do it right and we need to spend the right money. So I think everything I heard, I agree with. It's going to be probably 20 million and we're going to have to budget about $20 million. But I think the strategy is right to start from scratch. Should we have a new building versus gutting the old one? Where's the right location? And I think we're doing it the right way. So I'm supportive and I think we're ahead of it in the sense that saying, look, this is what it might cost and we need a plan for it. So I think this is a great process so far.
So let's make sure that everybody who has not toured the building in the recent past gets over there with either Leon, John, or Andrew to do a walkthrough so you see for yourself what the existing facility is. And do that before the next meeting.
Sounds good.
So I think with that, we've accomplished our kickoff goal. And
It's time to say Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Thank you all. Have a good weekend. We'll talk soon. Happy New Year too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You too.
Merry Christmas.
you.
Happy New Year.
Yes, same to everyone.